Rick Lays is chairman of the July presentation committee, and here is Rick to introduce tonight's speaker.
I asked Roland Schable to come tonight because he has a really interesting story to tell. Roland is a retired corporate pilot. He has many aviation flight certifications and mechanic certifications, including flight instructor and IA and so forth. But interestingly, among all of his other occupations, he's restored in 1941 Taylorcraft in pristine condition and taken it one step above and beyond, putting it on floats, which was a major project in and by itself. And I'd like to welcome Roland to take over. Thank you very much for coming.
Nation of Pilots, 1941, the Civilian Pilot Training Program. It was initiated by the federal government, and it produced over 400,000 pilots because they knew there was going to be a war and there would be a shortage of aviators. And after the war started, it became the WTS, which is a War Training Service. And Taylorcraft was involved in this program, and this was their tandem trainer that they had designed for this. The Taylor brothers started out first with a side-by-side airplane and had no intention of building a tandem airplane. And my Taylorcraft was involved in that war training program. It was brought from Alliance, Ohio to Kenosha. But we'll get into that a little bit later on. I wanted to start with the history of Taylorcraft. It started in 1927, and it was called the Aero Wing Company, and it was formed by Gilbert and Gordon Taylor. And they built an airplane that was called the Chummy, and it was in Rochester, New York that they had started this. And it was called the Chummy because it was side by side. So this was their first design that they had made. And then at 1927, after Lindbergh had made aviation famous, the cities were competing for someone to build aircraft throughout the nation. So Bradford, Pennsylvania gave them a pretty good deal to go ahead and build the Chummy. They built 6 of them, and it had unpleasant flying characteristics. And in fact, Gordon, Gilbert's brother, was killed in it. And so the company went bankrupt. And during the bankruptcy, this unknown person at the time made a bid in 1930 of $761 for all of the rest of the assets, and it happened to be Bill Piper, W.T. Piper. And Piper, Gilbert was really upset about his brother dying, so Piper made Gilbert the half partner, and then he was also to be president, and it was called Taylor Aircraft Company then. They gave him the name Taylor Aircraft Company. And this was late in July of 1930, C.G. Taylor, that would have been Gilbert, and his father, who was a sheet metal man, and a couple of other guys drew up the plans for the first Cub. And in 1935, Taylor became ill, and here again Piper bought him out, and the buyout, the purchase, was called the Great Plane Robbery. So now Piper and Taylor came to a disagreement, and then they separated at this time. And Taylor then went ahead and built his own airplane, started to build his own airplane. And it had this 23012 airfoil on it, which was quite a bit different than the Cub. You know, the Cub had, I believe, a Clark Y, and this is that symmetrical airfoil on it. And Taylor did a whole bunch of other designs for it, and he made this airplane fly 15 miles an hour faster than the original Cub that he had made with Piper. So he's on his own now, and he had moved to Alliance, Ohio now in 1936. Moved to Alliance, Ohio, and formed the Taylorcraft Aviation Corporation. And this is where the Taylorcraft comes in 1941. Let's see if that goes. Yeah, let's stop it. Well, no, let's go ahead and run it through. Sure, and here's a schematic of that airplane, and here is the airplane. This was it in when I bought it in 1992. The wings I refinished the wings. The old owner sold it to me, and this is the same condition that I bought it in. It was fairly well preserved, and that was original fabric on fuselage fabric, and I had the wings recovered. And this is my son soloing it. I soloed him at Janesville Airport, and that's me leaving for my son's first solo in 1992. And before I go too much further, this plane, as I said, came from Alliance to Kenosha to participate in this civilian pilot training program, and the plane was owned by none other than Ruth Hartman, and she's the one that owned the Kenosha Airport, and she was a pilot. And let's see, I'll get some of this information here. I'll read a little excerpt right from some of her accolades. She got her chance to teach others to fly in 1940, and she became chief instructor in civilian pilot training program at Kenosha. She went on to train hundreds of Navy flight cadets during World War II. Harmon was one of 50 female civilian pilot training instructors in the United States, and the only one in Wisconsin. She was also the first female airport manager in Wisconsin. She remained in Kenosha at the airport until 1950 and then moved to California. So there's a whole interesting article on her as a aviation advocate. So, and in the logbooks, it shows, I have them here too if you want to look at them later on. It shows her as being owner, and it shows the flying that was done when it came in 1941 to Kenosha, and the plane flew about 2,000 hours in around 4 or 5 years. Not quite 1,800 hours in 5 years, which equates to like 360 hours a year, and it's all for training pilots for the war service. Oh yes, and this after for a year in 19. Let me see, when did I do this? In 1994 is when I started the fuselage restoration. So the bottom picture is 1994, when that's Erlene and we kind of helped each other in taping out a design for it because the fabric was bad at this time. So we had to start a recover project on it. And here the wings are, but the wings were done prior. So this is and you see the old fuselage in the back, and this is the process I used, Superflight 2 process. on it, which is deck proof and spray fill, and that's the taping and putting the envelope on both wings. And that was in my garage, so I didn't. It's kind of tough to find a place to do it, so we did it in the garage for over the winter time. There's the boot cowl. There's the boot cowl that is blue. We're looking forward. That's where your feet go. The rudder pedals are on the bottom. It's off. It's off the airplane. And they had these tar strips on there, not asbestos, asphalt or tar for soundproofing and rigidity for the firewall. And that's that Taylorcraft blue, and I don't know how many old-timers are here, but years ago the whole plane was blue. It was like they dipped the airplane in a blue metallic in the early years. So this blue was left over from that. And there's the fuselage and my son working on it. And we had another place for this. Where I worked, we had a storage bin. So you have to find any place you can to be able to do this, because it takes, like I said, it was 2 years to get this job done. So there's the interior. And it's an open cowled Lycoming, 65 horsepower. It was converted from 55 to 65. And this is the finished plane, and it was at I got one of the company's flatbeds, and we put the wings on the flatbed and drove them from Janesville down from. I worked for J.P. Cullen, drove them from Cullen's place all the way out to Albion, and put the wings and put the whole plane together out at Jana on a fairly good day. And here it is, restored and flying. Now here's some of the float. Here's where the floats come in. This was Mercury, and this is the way I transported them. Tied them on top of the car, and Earlene drove them up to Shawano, because that's where we launched it from. She drove them up to Shawano, and I flew the airplane on wheels up there, and she had a harrowing experience. One of the ropes broke in a high wind, and we almost lost them all in the Lake Butamorts because the floats were flying. But she managed to get them up there. And up at Shawano is where the lake is right next to the airport. Whoops, what did I hit? I'm sorry. Yeah, the lake is right next to the airport, and they're noted for doing this. And I wanted a safe way to do this, so this is where we're equipping the plane with floats. When I recovered it, that's why it took longer, is because I wanted to put the float fittings on it, and it required welding different attachments in order to get the floats so that they would adapt. So that's one of the things that took quite a bit of extra time. And here is the tractor and pushing it into the water, and there she sits. Of course, that's Lake Koshkonong. So if you guys that are real sharp, you'll know that that's not Shawano. So, but there it is on the water. First flight on the water. And here's one of the surprise connections that came from doing this job. The EAA has a magazine. Came out with a magazine. Let's see. I don't even know if I have it with me now. I don't think I brought it. Yes, sir. Yeah, sport aviation, and this was in 1997. And this is excerpts from the article. What happened is that winter comes and you take the floats off and you put the wheels on. So what I had done is after the season, I landed over by Kenosha over there by Ziegler. Has a Ziegler. I don't know if you fellows know him. He has a base runway out there, and he launches. He'll launch from there with a dolly. So I landed over there at the end of the season, and this article goes on to say that at that time I took the floats off and took the floats off and then came home to Janesville and put the wheels in the car to take back to Ziegler to put the wheels on for the winter, to put it in a hangar on wheels. So, but I went out one morning, I loaded the wheels in the car, and then came out the next morning, and the car was gone. Somebody had stolen the car with the wheels, in it. All the landing gear was in it. So it was panic there for quite a while, and finally I said, well, I have to go to Ziegler anyway to at least take the floats off. And it was probably 3-4 hours later, and then the police found the car in a ditch, and the kids destroyed everything that was in the car, in the glove box, but they didn't damage the landing gear, so the gear was safe. So then I drove to Ziegler's and put the landing gear on for the winter. So this is some of the shots from the article, but these aren't. These are just here. This is from the article here now, and we'll let it run through. And these are pictures. We had a photo shoot. I had a guy help me with the photo shoot. It was a cold morning when we did this. Real cold morning. So, and then here's the process that we do that I did for putting the wheels back on it. I landed at Jana Airport, and it's parked here. You land on the grass, and you have to land very carefully, and once it's on the grass, it's just it's hard to taxi. Yeah, it's very, very difficult. In fact, it doesn't even move. So you go out with a truck or a car and tie ropes on it and pull it around. And that hangar in the back was the only hangar on the field that was high enough to hoist it. So because you have to get up fairly high to hoist it. So we got the wheels back on it, and that's the hangar with the floats in it. And I do that every winter in order to keep it inside rather than keeping it on the lake or someplace where the water is going to freeze and it won't get protection. Pardon?
What confidence did you have that the thing wouldn't nose over when you landed on the grass? There are some pictures here that you can see. You don't have any. No, I'm just kidding. No, you'll have to land really flat on the keel, and there's no flare. You cannot flare because the airplane, even as it slows down, will tend to flare because of the engine running. It's so light. It's fairly light. So you cannot flare because then the rudder will dig in, the tail will dig in. So you have to really keep it really flat and land at a slow speed at the same time. No, the grass doesn't have to be wet. In fact, it's better if it isn't because you'll get one surface more slippery than the other, and then it'll try to turn on you. It'll try to turn. You do have some rudder authority until it gets really slow, and then because at Ziegler's I started to go into a turn because the grass is irregular. You don't know on the strip where it is. So. Like a glassy water landing.
Basically, yes, like a glassy water. Oh, yes. Anybody has any questions or wants to add any comments, please.
Roland, I'll just mention that one of our members, Archie Hinkleman, with most of the people here know, worked at Black Hawk Tech as an instructor there. He also has a float plane, and every year he would always land into Rock County Airport with his float plane, so that the students could learn what a float plane is all about. And he landed on the grass there, and the students then built a cart.
Yeah, a dolly. Yeah, that's what a lot of cart or right. That's what a lot of people do. But I didn't.
He did that every year. Landed on grass.
Yes, yeah. He had the students help him. It was mostly Erlene and I that were doing this, so we didn't have advantage of. So it was for us. It was safer to go ahead and truck it up to Shawano and do it that way. And this is one of the surprise connections that we were talking about. This is the Kilberg family had written me a letter and wanted to know where the plane was. Larry Kilberg, one of the boys in that picture, had his father's plane pictures on the wall for his whole childhood, and he was searching for the plane. So he wrote me a letter and wanted to know if I had it and if it was still in good condition, and if I would fly to Dubuque. That's where the picture was taken from, Dubuque, to meet the family and to see the plane. So, and this is I forgot Rosetta. She's the mother, or the wife of Julian, who bought the plane in 1946. She was like 80 some years old at the time, and they had the plane. They bought the plane in 1946 and owned it till 1956. They had it for 11 years, and now they're searching for the plane because the children want to know the parents' history. So, and here's the picture. There's the picture that was on Larry Kilberg's wall at home. The top one. That's Julian and that's Grandma Rosetta, and she's down there on the bottom on the left. And Arlene and I at Dubuque. So we gave her a ride, and it was the first ride she'd had since they had sold the plane. In what year did I say there? It was 56. 11 yeah, they owned, so that was a surprise reunion for the airplane and the family and all. There she is, and that's one of the sons that is by the strut there. When we landed, there was no one on the field. We thought, we just saw this one terminal building, and we said there's no one there. And we landed and shut the engine off, and the door opened up, and all of a sudden, like 25 or 30 people came out. For the whole family came out, just like Lindbergh landing at Paris or something. It was just amazing. It was just amazing to see them all pouring out of that building. And then here's another surprise connection. This is the Thyssen family. They owned the plane. In let's see, they had the plane for 13 years. And that's Bill Thyssen on the right. He's the fellow on the right. And I got a phone call from these people, and they wanted to know if I had the plane. Somehow or another, they had found it through the internet and registration. They wanted to know if I had the plane, and they wanted to come and see it. So let's see, how many are there? 7 people in there or so, 6 or 7. So all of them came to Janesville and stayed overnight, a couple of nights, so that the father and the daughter in there and the sons, so he could get a ride in the plane. He's the only one that flew. He's the only one that flew in the plane, and he was 86 years old at this time, right there. He was 86, and he got a ride in the float plane. He didn't expect it to be a float plane. He thought it was on wheels. So he was just, as you can see, exuberant. Yeah. So those are some of the surprise connections you have with an airplane. It just isn't building an airplane. Here's the last owner here. This is Chuck Jolly. He had the airplane for 15 years. And he sold it to me, and I had started working on this plane in 1977. That's when I first saw it. He bought it at Lancaster, Mineral Point, Homer Lancaster. It was the operator at that time. And he bought it from Homer, I guess, and then flew it to Janesville in 1977. So I've known the plane quite a while. And then I wanted the first offer to buy it when he wanted to sell it. And while Chuck owned it, that's when I recovered the wings. And if I had known I was going to own the plane, I would have done a better job on recovering the wings. But so I didn't want to charge him too much for it. So anyway, that's it. And then on the bottom, that's the parade of flight at Oshkosh. We took it to Oshkosh, and this is the positioning for the parade. And I've got some other pictures for that too. Let's see, and then I don't know what's coming up next. Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. There's. Let's see, what have we got? Oh, all right. That's the little. I've got the two pictures mixed up, but that's the putting the plane in at Shawano on top. That's how they do it there, floating it off of just like a boat, putting it in the water off of a skid with tires on it. And that's Oshkosh on the bottom, coming in, and they give you that bridle, and they have you tie it down, and let's see what else. Oops, I don't know if I can get. There it goes. Here it is. All right. And here's some of the other surprise connections on top. That was at Midway Airport. A group of us got an exemption for going in for the 50th anniversary for the Battle of Midway. And this was 1992 when that was happening in June of 92, celebrating the Armed Forces Day. So they had a bunch of us come in that had a connection to the military, and this plane had, civilian pilot training, so it qualified as a military airplane. So, and that's the bottom one now is Glenview. I was invited to go to Glenview Naval Air Station. That's one of the planes. That's one of my friends. See the T-craft behind it, and it was in '92 also. I'm pretty sure that was '92 also. Let's see. No, '93. '93, before I had restored the fuselage on it. So you can see it in the back. The rudder's a different color, and the fuselage is the same. So that was at Glenview Naval Air Station that we got to go into there. So that was another surprise connection. And that's Erlene and I at Dubuque. And also my son, he got his seaplane rating in the Taylorcraft also, and he also soloed in it. He soloed at 16. That was one of the first slides when we were at Janesville Airport. He soloed that day, and then he got his driver's license in the afternoon, soloed in the morning. So this is just the airplane is still working and using its purpose. And that's the. That's basically it. What the specifics are? It's for weight. It's the gross weight. It's 1,150 pounds gross weight, with the wheels on it. So what the useful load is 445. So you get two people that weigh 200 pounds, and you got 45 pounds for fuel on it, see. Now, a seaplane, it goes up to 1228 when you put the floats on it, so they give you a little higher weight on that. So, but that reduces the useful load to 400 pounds, 408 on it. So, pardon? Is that qualified? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep, 12, 28, 12. Even with floats on it. 1320, right, for light sport, 13. Oh, you can go 1400. So it's light sport. Yep. Now, the floats weigh 165 pounds. Oh, and then that fin on there had to be added on because the floats want to control the airplane. I mean, there's such a wide area; they're 15 feet long, and they want to turn the airplane on you. So it needs more directional control. So they put the fin on, and those are some of the weldments that I had to do when I restored the fuselage. The The cruise, it slows it down a little bit. Cruise, not very much, very little, about 5 to 10 miles an hour, but it really makes it stable. It just loves gusty conditions when it's with the floats on. It gets off the water better, and it just flies just beautiful in the gusty, rough weather. As you can see, the lake. That's when we were shooting this photo shoot. That's the condition of the lake that was in. And it's a great experience. So, are there any questions or yes?
On a typical day, gross weight, how long is your takeoff run on floats?
It just depends on the water and it's long. It's really long. It's probably at about a 45-second to a minute. Yeah, it's long. It's really long. In fact, Early and I, when we went to Oshkosh, it really surprised me because it was like a 90-degree day when we took off, and we had a pretty good wind, and it surprised me. We were off in probably 45 seconds or so, something like that. Normally, it's most float planes, you're 15 to 30 seconds, something like that. And this plane is not like your regular float planes because they'll leave the water. The normal float plane with some horsepower will leave the water on purpose. No, accidentally it'll leave the water. This one you got to take off on purpose. I mean, you have to just plane it and hold it for it to get it on the step in order for it to lift off. Because higher horsepower float planes will just come out of the water without hardly any work at all.
So it's still 65 horse?
It's a 65, yeah, 65. Lycoming 65, which is pretty weak.
Can I relate the time that you took me up?
Yes, Paul could tell an experience.
I went up with Roland and we almost crossed the lake the first time. and we didn't get off.
We were heading for the river.
We were headed for the river, so we turned around, went back and picked a different angle of approach on the wind, and that time we got off. But it was a pretty long run.
Yes, it is.
And by the time we got across the lake, I was looking at the tops of the trees myself and thinking, boy, those tops of trees are tall. And Roland kind of laid it off to the left and didn't try to go over the trees. So it's between him and I, it loaded down the plane pretty good.
Yeah.
Am I seeing a water rudder on just the port pontoon?
Pardon?
Am I seeing
Yes.
just the port side?
One water rudder. It does real well with one rudder. Yeah, even in the rough. Here's where it's like boating. This part of boating in the windy conditions is being able to anticipate and turn when you think you're going to hit the dock, and you still hit the dock. Yeah, and you hit all kinds of things in the water too. There's logs and pine things floating, especially after a big wind. So I have not had any serious damage from all of that. So let's see. Any other questions?
One of those first pictures you had there, it showed like a tricycle gear on one.
Yes, that was offered in 41 also. Yeah. Yeah, on the bottom of that picture it showed that it tandem. That was tandem because the military wanted the airplane tandem. See, and then Piper had the advantage because they were already tandem. So Taylorcraft had to really switch gears and produce it. In 6 months, I think they put a tandem airplane out for the military contract because it had to have that front and back seating for observation. So they made an observation, and it was 04. I had written it down somewhere. 070. Oh, yeah, it's right here. YO57. YO57 was the military Taylorcraft. Any other questions? Okay, in closing, now I'm gonna. Oh,
Roland, I just wanted to
yes.
make sure that everyone had an opportunity to see the collage that you and your wife Erlene put together.
Oh, yes.
It has
Help
the
yourself
additional
to the pictures there. So in closing, I'm going to say this, that this isn't a about me. It's about you guys, us, and all of us, the restorers, the mechanics, the pilots, the enthusiasts, and the advocates. It's about keeping the aviation history of the past, keeping it. It's about keeping aviation for the future so that there will be a future aviation history. And I thank you.
Thanks, Roland. Very interesting presentation. How long did it take you to restore the plane? How many years?
2 years for the fuselage, but the wings were already done, and the engine was already done. But it's been an ongoing project right now, and changing the engine. I wore that one engine out. 400 hours is about all that it would take. And I found an interesting thing out about why. And the engines, I had about 6 of these Lycoming engines that I had taken apart, and there was nothing good in them, hardly anything good in them. It was all scored. Everything was scored in it. So I had my engine apart, and I'm all apart, cleaned up, and I'm looking at it, and I'm picking away at the inside of it, and I get a piece of Scotch tape, and I rub it on the inside of the case, and I pull it off, and it's covered with particles, casting particles, because it's a sand cast engine. And all these particles and all these engines is going through the gear, the bearings and the valves, and that's why the engine wears out. Every engine I had was not any good. So I went into it a little bit further and found out that at the racing guys, they put in what's called a black velvet, and it's a special coating inside the engine to contain all of this debris and also make the engine, the oil, flow a lot better. So this new engine that I've got has been coated, and we'll see how long it lasts. But all the engines, and even in the logbook, shows like 400 hours they had to take them, wore out, and so was mine that I took off. Just wore out, no compression.
Still flying on floats?
I have not lately. That's another thing I've been doing. I've been doing a lot of instruction with it. Not a lot, but a fair amount of instruction with it. So I have students that want to do tail wheel checkouts, and on the floats it isn't practical. And I had a couple of students.
Are there any STCs for something like a C-85 or something?
Yes, for that airplane it's an 85. But it's pretty elaborate to convert that early 41. The 46 is easier to convert because you have to beef up the strut attachments and just change the mounts, and of course that would be changed anyway. You have to beef up the strut attachments and a lot of other work. So it's easier to. It's probably better to buy a 46 model that has all of the heavier strut work done to it, and then it's very little to do with an 85. In fact, that makes a beautiful float plane on it with an 85 in there. Down where I learned to fly on floats was down at Brown Seaplane Base, and every year Brown will go. They have a outing where he'll take this 85 horsepower Taylorcraft, and they'll take the Cub. They have an 85 Cub, and the Cub has got to stop for fuel twice before the T-Craft does. So just because the T-Craft will cruise so much faster than the Cub will burn less fuel. So that's
You're talking Florida.
Florida, yeah, in Florida, right in Florida. Where is it? Winter Haven? You guys know where? Not Winter Haven. Yeah, Winter Haven.
Is the stall speed higher on that more efficient wing too?
No, no. Well, that's it with the. Cy is laughing. Go ahead, Cy.
Oh, if you're flying a Cub in the Taylorcraft, you just gotta learn to slow the Taylorcraft down, because it ain't like a Cub, you pull the throttle back and the Cub will land. I had a very well-known instructor give me a biennial one time in mine, and the broadhead, and I told him, "T. John, you gotta slow this thing down." No, I'll be all right. No, you go around. No, I'll be all right. I said, well, no, you're not. You know, Si, I think I'll go around. But if you don't get it slowed down, you get down to ground effect, it wants to skate right along.
You see, that, very little has changed in the, this is real interesting. They all, every airplane manufacturer has a Chet Peak. He writes about every detail, and it's just fascinating. But he talked about the design of that early Cub from when he broke off from Piper and went to that, he kept the same airfoil for the Taylorcraft, and Piper went to that flat bottom. And he said 15-mile-an-hour gain in speed with the new airplane that Taylorcraft had.
What do you cruise at with wheels?
Pardon, Jim?
What do you cruise at with wheels?
It'll go 85, 90 on wheels. Pretty easy, 85, 90.
And with floats?
Floats is about 10 miles slower. It'll do 80 to 85, 80 versus 90. Or, it depends how much RPM you want to run on it to get, but it doesn't go ahead.
Well, and you get to the VC-12Ds or with an 85 in it, they'll give us less than 150 run for their money.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have not flown
More efficient.
the 85 much, yeah. So it's a really good airfoil, really nice airplane, yeah.
Any other questions for Roland? Ken?
We have a little something for you if you want to work your way around the front here. We here at Chapter 60 have a little routine that we like to go through for our guest speakers. It's nothing fancy, but we've got a certificate here for you in appreciation for being brave enough to come and speak in front of us. And it just says, in appreciation for being the guest speaker at our July 2001 chapter meeting, membership in the EAA Chapter 60 Speakers Guild is hereby bestowed upon Roland Schable and the 13th day of July 2011. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Roland.